Peter Chang here for Macho Cave TV, and welcome to part 16 of our X-Factory SCX-60 CF RC car build. And we're working on Bag E at this point in our build. And what's interesting about Bag E, this is actually the rear suspension of the SCX-60 CF. And what's interesting about the rear suspension, it also includes the control arms, and then the 3-degree and 4-degree toe in for the rear of the car. So if you're going to go ahead and build this out, I'm just going to show you the rear control arms here. And what's interesting about this is that it's actually you have to cut the spruce on here. This is actually pretty well made. It's specifically it's a X-Factory part. It's not a team associated part. So if you're going to try to put on your SC10 rear arms on there, they won't fit. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the spruce here, and I'm going to go ahead and try to weaken it a little bit, and just be patient because you don't want to snap this right off. But I might just make a little cut in here to see if I can actually cut this part out. There we go. That seems to be going. And I just made another cut there. It is a little bit off on there, so I'm going to go ahead and have to go back and go ahead and sand that component out. But just be patient. I'm just going to go ahead and just clip the spruce here. The instruction manual actually tells you to kind of try to twist it off. Just not that patient to twist it off, but if you have more time, go ahead and do so. I'm just going to go ahead and grab some medium grade sandpaper and just go ahead and just sand this side off here. And I'm going to be careful not to sand too hard because I don't want to wreck this part, but just sand enough so that I sand off that flashing. And you see that it's not going to take too long to necessarily do this sanding, but just be patient and it would come out nice and neat. So just go ahead and just and also I'm just kind of neurotic about it. I'm just also just kind of cleaning it as I'm going along, making sure that just the sanding is going just so good here, and just trying to keep this curved and smooth. If you sand too hard, you might actually flatten out the control arm, and that's not what I want to be doing. So just want to make sure I'm keeping this control arm smooth and perfect here. And it's looking pretty good, actually. Pretty impressed with the control arm. It also has the little knob hinge, so you could put in a roll bar in there as well if needed. So there we have it. We have this all nice and sanded, and we're ready to go on to the next step. So we're going to go ahead and put on a hinge pin on here, and just going to check to make sure that everything looks good there. And looks like it's all nice and set. Just going to focus the camera so we can see this. And also there's also slots in there, so when you put in your shocks in there, you have a couple of choices for alignment of the shocks and stuff in there. So we've already built out our rear CVAs. We're going to go ahead and attach the CVAs from step 15 to our rear control arms in this step. So it's looking pretty good. Everything's lining up. And remember, if you remember from our last step, from step 15, I mentioned that basically the right side of the CVAs goes on the left side of the body, and the left side CVA goes on the right side of the body. And this is backwards from a regular SC10 because just because the ball studs are actually in a different position on the SCX-60 CF. So realize this step is a little bit backwards, but it's going to work out much better by putting them in, swapping in the left and the right sides. So let's go ahead and get some more hinge pins and some more parts here. Let's go ahead and start by putting in a ball stud on here on our rear CVA, and let's go ahead and grab the hex driver so we could actually screw this in. And once we get this in, we go ahead and get started with the rest of our build. You could actually do this in different steps, but I find that I like to get the ball stud in here first. And you might notice that my ball stud is actually silver. Your ball stud, if you're doing this as a conversion, your ball stud might just be the black one. I actually just ran out of the correct size, so I'm just substituting with the with a ball stud that I do have. This hex nut that I'm putting on here, this is actually the 44449 nut. So in case you're wondering what part number that one was, and just making sure that this is on nice and tight so that everything's more precise. There's nothing worse than having like a little imprecision in the rear axle or slop in the rear axle, just because that does affect your driving and precision and accuracy of driving. And I'm just going to go ahead and put on a little sponge on here. And these are kind of annoying. It's sometimes it's just tempting to skip the step just because it's a little harder to put on. There we go. Everything's looking great and nice. And we could go ahead and move on to the next step here. I recommend getting like a dog bone spacer in here just to eliminate some slop in the rear. And this part number is 9273, and I just recommend that you pick up this the spacer, just because you never know if you're going to need it or not. I recommend getting like a second set of these, just in case you need to fix up some additional inaccuracies or slop somewhere. So I'm going to go ahead and thread in the hinge pin, and this is going to just take a little bit of patience. Sometimes when you get a new part, there's some flashing on the side of the mold, and it's hard to scrape them out from the inside, but just recommend that just be a little bit more patient, and you should be able to thread everything straight through. And it's kind of funny, you see me like just kind of struggling with trying to get this hinge pin through here. And I'm just going to go ahead and bring the rear CVA in there, and I'm just going to go ahead and thread this through. And just remember, this part requires a little bit of patience, just because you have a lot of brand new parts, and you're just trying to get everything to align. If you have an older part and you're having this much trouble, it might be because the part is warped, or you just might need to replace that part. So just 2 times when you might be having this trouble. If it's a older part, everything's kind of broken in, everything's kind of dialed, everything should just slide straight in. But if your older part just doesn't slide straight in, it might be warped or damaged, and this at this point it would be a great time to just go ahead and replace that part. And once again, I just kind of apologize. It's taking a little bit longer, but you get to see the build in real time, warts and all. So just working on just trying to get this hinge pin in here. It's not quite lining up, and we see it's just a little bit jaggedy. So just go ahead and you don't want to see me go through the torture completely putting that in. The next part I recommend is getting some shims, and shims are great for spacing and decreasing slop in the wheel. just getting everything once again just aligned just a little bit more precisely. So if you do put everything in there and you are experiencing some more slop, yeah, you could also, once again, you could tighten everything up just by adding some shims inside there too. You could just take the time, uh, add in one or two shims in there to decrease the slop as well too. Once again, like if you're racing and you're concerned about weight, once again, it's just you may not want to add a lot of shims, just because if you put too much in there, once again, you add more weight to the car. But in this case, I feel it's just kind of negligible, that in the performance it gives me and the accuracy it gives me, just by just like this, just a few millimeters of shim spacing does wonders for my driving. So I'm just going to go ahead and add in some more shims in here. Once again, it's just it's going to be a little bit harder to put the hinge pin in there, and there's also more parts that you'll be concerned about when you're putting in all the hinge pins in there. But man, it is going to be worth it, because the car is just going to be so dialed, and when you drive it, you're just going to have that much more control, and it's really just a nice little tip that you could use. But for right now, as you see me trying to add in this last shim in here, it is torture. It is just so difficult to get this last shim in that I'm just tempted to leave it out. But the control part of me, the part of me that loves the control of the car, or the increased control of the car, says no, we gotta make sure we get this one part in. And once it fits, you see that it decreases the slop and tightens everything up just a tad. So if you want, you could add in 2 or 3 more shims in there and decrease the slop. If you do add in some more shims, you want to put them on the same side, on the opposite side, so that everything is balanced and everything is symmetrical. Okay, let's move on to the next step. Next, we're going to go ahead and just put in the screw in, so the hinge pin doesn't fall out, and that the hinge pin just stays captured inside there. And just totally annoyed with this step, because this is like the world's smallest screw, and you see here I'm still using the hex wrench that came with my RTR, and believe me, this is getting really old when you're screwing in a screw this small with a hex wrench that feels so bad in your hand. And just remember, I really believe that you get the best tools that you could possibly get. I'd suggest for this, if you don't have a lot of cash, get a WeHaul hex wrench, or if you have money to burn, or simply want the best tool possible, get a hoodie hex Allen wrench, and the two can't do you wrong. So once we got that in, the hinge pin should stay in place. I'm just double checking that it's gonna be in there. It just doesn't feel tight, but you don't. This is one of those things where you don't want to over tighten, because if you over tighten plastic, then everything kind of falls apart and loosens again. So with plastic components, just don't over tighten that. All right, everything's looking pretty good, and everything's looking like it's going to stay in place, and everything is nice and solid. So we are ready now for the next step, and that is getting the ball cups in place here. If you once again, if you have a donor SC10, you could go ahead and go on to the next step. But I'm going to go ahead and just finish sanding the ball cup here, and I'm going to go and have to sand these down so I could make my so I could go ahead and make these turnbuckles. So once again, I'm using the RPM ball cups. I really like the white, and then I'm going to use the factory team turnbuckles, just the anodized blue and white. I feel aesthetically look just very pleasing. It doesn't really add anything to the control other than that the titanium might be stronger than the stainless steel that is with the stock SC10. But pretty much we're ready to go ahead to the next step. Thanks for watching, and remember, everything matters.